questions or whatever.
Yep. There we go. I think we're live. Right? Yeah, it says live on Facebook. I think we're there. Are we live?
I think we are live. Jefferson and Alyssa Bethke. Hello. Good.
Hi.
It's kind of evening, my time. What time is it there? 2:30 afternoon?
Yes, middle of like nap time in our toddler house right now. Yes, we have like a toddler family quiet time from kind of 1 to 4, 1 to 3:30, and that's
we used to do that. In fact, our oldest is 14, and we still have an afternoon.
Oh yeah,
I was gonna say I don't think we'll ever get rid of that time.
Well, yeah, I mean, we said it was the nap time, but no one really naps anymore. It's just like, no, this is so amazing, we're not getting rid of it. So amateur parents, like, just word from the wise, when they stop sleeping, that doesn't mean nap time is over. That just actually
to,
use the fact
time.
that we built that rhythm to keep doing it.
Yes, 110%. Pretty much any day that we're home, there's like a little block of about 2 hours where we're all of a sudden kind of.
I think adults, even if you don't have kids, I feel like adults should cultivate that. It's like, it's shown us, like, you need that space.
Yeah, something like that. Well, thank you. Those are precious hours when the kids are sleeping that you would give us your time. I'm so happy you're here. For all of you who are watching, welcome to the Ruthless Elimination of Furry Book Club Part 2 or Week 2. It's kind of pretty loose and rough, but basically doing 3 weeks, Jeff and Alyssa, that are tied to the 3 parts of the book. So part 1 is kind of all built around the story with John Ortberg and Dallas Willard and the iconic line, "You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life." And it's basically my case for a life of slow. And so we were with Ortberg last week, and that was pure genius. If you're just watching now, can't recommend you go back and listen to that enough. No pressure on you guys. Just, can you be PhD with like super relaxed and comfortable in your own skin and crazy wise?
When anyone says last week was pure genius, this will be interesting.
So part 2 of the book is basically, my thesis that the solution to the problem of hurry is not more time. It's to simplify, it's to slow down and simplify your life around what really matters. Now, that is much easier said than done, in my experience and most other people's experience. And the reason I wanted to chat to you guys was all sorts of reasons, just your friendship over the years. Yeah. And you've been so kind to me so many different times in so many different ways, and I'm so grateful. But also, you guys, my pastoral experience, how to frame this in a gentle way, the people that so back up, a big part of my work is an attempt to kind of take the monastic and bring it into the domestic, to take kind of, meaning like the ancient practices and rhythms of prayer and contemplation and quiet and Sabbath and a life of the soul, and where you're very awake to your interior self, and to bring that into the chaos of, I live in a city and I have an iPhone and a demanding job and I'm maybe raising some kids and it's super secular everywhere I go and there's distraction everywhere and the world is angry and superficial and consumeristic. Like, how do we live the monastic in the domestic? And so for obvious reasons, as a pastor, the people that I get, some of the most pushback from, or not pushback like in an antagonistic way, more just like not for us way, is parents with little kids or entrepreneurs who are kind of running their own business and all the demands that, work doesn't stop at 5 p.m. or whatever. And you guys are a great example to me because you're both parents, you have little kids, you're running businesses, you're entrepreneurial, you have your hands on all sorts of different things. You're best known, of course, for your kind of internet work, but you guys do all sorts of stuff. And yet you guys have really found ways to live in rhythm. You have a real deep passion through your own personhood and culture in Maui for a life of prayer and a life of Sabbath rest and even a life of simplicity. So I would just love to hear. So let me just ask the first question of the day. There'll be a bunch more, but like, how do you process that? Because I think a lot of parents and business owners and workers in your stage of life just kind of write off things like Sabbath, interior soul work for, well, I'll do that when I'm older. And unfortunately, through the lens of spiritual formation, what they don't realize is every day and everything you do, you're becoming somebody. Yeah. And by the time you are older, you likely won't be the type of person who would do that stuff. Yeah, and so what you think is a delay is actually more likely a denial. A hardening. Yeah. There's something that happens to the heart, and these are the formative years. And the thing I think about a lot is the conspiracy between my kid's a little older than yours, but right as the kids are most in need of dad, and there's, without getting into all that controversial gender stuff, it's just base secular psychology stuff, mom plays a key or emotional role in younger children and dad as they get a little bit older. So my kids are all coming into that dad is primary emotional attachment moment. So I have to give my kids more now than I ever have, even more than when they were little, at the time when my quote career is demanding more of me than ever. And so there's a real test of the heart, like, what will I prioritize most? Because I see it so easy how dudes in middle age could just so quickly prioritize work over family. I'm like, it's literally a daily temptation for me. So talk about that, like that open-ended question.
Yeah, shoot, we could talk the whole episode on that.
I'm like, no, keep talking. I want to hear more about it.
I want to hear what you have to say on that. So you go first, because I don't have much.
I want you to go first.
Well, I don't have much to say because I want to hear what you have to say on that, because I know you're passionate about that. But I will say, I'm just in agreement that I think you have to understand. I think it is the grace and truth kind of paradox at some level, because it's like I have grace for so many people that say that, because it is true. Just the more you study it, that yes, like our culture has put us on a track and a trajectory where it's nearly impossible to live a healthy spiritual life. Like, and it's a compounding interest game that started, you can say thousands of years ago, but my pet one is 200 years ago with the Industrial Revolution. So like you have multiple generations of like things of how work changed, how family changed, how agriculture changed, how cities changed. That like, we already are born. Like, you have to realize that we're kind of born into like a losing game, and with the speed, the hustle, the hurry, the consumer, the pace, what work demands of you, what family demands of you, breaking of intergenerational relationships, all that stuff. So like there's grace there, because it's like, we are set up to fail 100%. And like, that's nearly impossible to turn that ship around. That's a cruise ship trying to turn around, not a speedboat. And then, but it's hard though too, because it does sometimes grate me. Like you probably because me and you hear it more than most, because we talk about it. So then we're also on the internet, and like, I'm just like, anyone who plays, there is some exceptions, but most people who are trying to play the exception game, it doesn't go well. Or it's like, that's just like, you're not the exception. You're not the exception. Yeah. Everyone has to sacrifice. Everyone has to, like, it's called ruthlessly eliminating hurry for a reason. Like, how do you ruthlessly eliminate something? You get a machete and you hack it to death. You know what I mean? Not to be intense, but it's true. Like you go after it. And you don't just kind of gently, softly do that. And because you're trying to beat something that has, multi-100-year momentum, So that's just, I'm just in agreement, but that is hard. So what would you say to that though? Like, how did we start that multi-year project? 'Cause that's one last thing I would say is that's the way I think to do it, is it's a multi-year project to start changing.
Yes, so many people not like a one and done.
Yes, and that's something that's really hard and kind of sad that we get a lot on emails of like, oh, I tried a Sabbath and it sucked and it's terrible. Never mind, or something, or say that with prayer, do that with whatever. And it's like, what? That's not how that works. Give it about 5 to 7 years.
Have you guys ever seen that the little graph for what learning theorists call the J curve?
No, what, where you like failed terribly first before you come up?
It's pretty self-explanatory. So learning theorists talk about, imagine a J, like a graph that goes down a little bit and then up a lot. And they talk about whenever you try anything new, and it could be the Sabbath, it could be playing the piano, it could be Spanish, it could be a parenting style, that you inevitably get worse at first as you try to focus on it. And then you hit bottom, and then you come back up and get proficient, and then you eventually get really good at it.
And there's more frustration.
Oh, for sure. But what happens is a lot of people quit when they hit the bottom, because they just feel like they're getting worse. So like, for example, a lot of people enjoy the weekend or they enjoy their day off, and then they start practicing Sabbath and they feel terrible about it. And then they quit right before it gets good,
Yes. Well, and I feel like, exactly. It's like you quit way before it gets good. And I feel like too, there's something there too with our philosophy of spirituality. A quote I've kind of started to say a lot that people have heard me on podcasts say is, I think, we're obsessed with spiritual perfection. God is obsessed with spiritual formation. And so that's why we quit, because we can't, we want spiritual perfection. And if we don't get that instantly, then there's something deep in our core and our all that stuff that's messing with us, and that's why we quit. So I don't know. Well, I made it up.
Oh,
that's so good. And that needs to be said. Like, we had an epiphany recently as a staff at our church when, because we have such a high value for emotional health and emotional healthy spirituality, Pete Scazzero's work and that crew. But what we had to learn the hard way, we're 100% for it, is that emotional health isn't like a destination that you arrive at. It's just it's a road that you travel. And so unfortunately, COVID's actually been really good for us, because we're all learning that we actually have like an inner work ethic that I don't think we quite, we can actually handle. We have broader shoulders than we thought, and we can work really hard and be at peace with Jesus. And I think what we're learning is, if you set up this ideal of the perfect kind of emotional health, spiritual formation, Sabbath, right, then all of a sudden you feel like a failure when you're actually doing great. You know what I mean? But if you hold it up against this perfection kind of view of this is what life is like, where I'm always happy and always at peace and always in the presence of God and never hurried, then you feel like a failure when actually you're making steady progress into maturity in the kingdom.
When it gets to last thing, then you go.
Yeah, I want to hear Alyssa. I want to hear.
Last thing is, and this is just John Mark and our Hustle and Hurry podcast.
It's like them two together, right? Could go off and off.
So
but no, you got nuggets though. You need to share.
I got to give you
Yes.
Hurry and hustle. We sure talk over.
Right. It's because we get excited. Excitement is different.
That's all it is.
Yeah, but okay. So last thing I'll say, which I've talked about this before too, but I think I've even kind of thought about it a little bit more with a different mode is that it also reveals our vision of time, right? Western view is linear, and what happens with a linear view of time is it's things to jump over and kind of like put in the bag, like almost like a video game of like, oh, I cashed that coin, I went to the next level, right? When the more Eastern biblical view of time is more about not about a straight line, but more about like a spiral, right? It's in circles. It's kind of this rhythm, this repeating cycles, rather than trying to just achieve kind of blocks on this line. And that's why too, we're so obsessed with bucket lists, because bucket lists are inherently a Western view of time. I need to check things off as dashes on this straight line. And if I don't, then I feel like I'm not living, authentically. When the scriptures is more obsessed with repeating a 7-day week, or repeating a year that has seasons, and you just do it over and over and over again. And that takes away the pressure and allows you to form yourself, not try to perfect yourself. And so, but you got it. So how does this feel and how have we jumped into this? Because we 5-6 years of kind of trying to turn around the ship. What's it like? And how are you in that?
Well, I just was thinking, I feel like, I don't even know if it's the hustle, but just the go, perform, do, serve. That was like what I just grew up with. So I don't think it's even the season ministry of life in 30s and young kids. It's just, I remember thinking when I was single and in college that like, I couldn't take a day off, like my studies would fail or all these things. And that's probably when I had the most free time I've ever had. And so, so I don't think there's ever like a perfect season. I think it's just this like world where the Western culture we're thrown into, and it just like, what nurtures us to think that we always have to be doing or like being productive, being purposeful. And I think that so seeps into the Christian message of like serve the Lord and do all these things for him and like seek him and all these things. And I love this new message that especially has been coming out with your guys' books in this fall of just like, oh, but we've forgotten about rest, and we've forgotten about the Lord is about our whole selves and its wholeness, and it's like our bodies, we have to rest, and what that looks like. And I think a lot of times we fight against Sabbath or all those things because at first it sounds like more work, like, oh, I have to craft a day, like the day that I get to just check out, I have to craft something. I have to like, be intentional about it. I don't want to be intentional. I just want to be like, peace out, everybody. So I think sometimes it can feel like, wow, I'm so exhausted from life. I don't want to have to work at something more. But it's like those things we talk about all the time. You guys talk about it, like Christmas or Thanksgiving or a birthday. Like those don't just happen. We get excited about them. We plan for it. Like our daughter's birthday is tomorrow. I've been thinking for a month, like, what are we going to do? What gifts am I going to get her? Asking her what does she want for each meal? And so you kind of have to treat Sabbath like that, like it's a party. And so what do you want it to craft like? And making it fun and intentional. It's like you work to get there, but you do that so then when you actually get there, it actually brings so much blessing because you can rest. And even, I mean, when we first started doing Sabbath, I think Kinsley was like a baby. And I've said this a lot, but Jeff was really getting into it and he was reading all these books. And I was like, I'm always like 2 years behind him in everything. And then
your books are the things that change her. I've told you the story before.
How's that chapter about Sabbath?
Let me just pause. is this just my marriage? How annoying is it when you say something to your spouse for years and they're just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
and
Oh yeah,
then
and it's
one
usually like
other
a girlfriend or
person
something or
or
someone
pastor
else. Yeah.
or normally a girlfriend is like,
Yep.
have you thought about? And they're like, oh my gosh, I just
Yes.
had this epiphany. I'm changing my whole life.
No, that's literally a running joke in our
telling you
marriage
that
that
for
like I
years.
almost give her that look instantly of like she knows when I give her that look like, oh, has he been saying this for the last 2 years? But it just I just had this epiphany through a podcast I listened to, a book I read, or a girlfriend. It's one of those three all the time.
It's so true.
Oh my goodness.
True.
Anyway, about Sabbath, and I remember getting actually really upset about it because I was like, there's no way I can, like, my days look all the same. We have a baby. Like, it's not like I can just check out and not make meals.
Right.
Like, we still need to eat. We still need to change diapers, all these things. And so we actually fought about it quite a bit. And I feel like we kind of like backed off a little bit for a year or two until we entered back in. And then I realized I finally came around to be like, oh, this is for my good. Like, God gave it to us for our good, and it's a blessing and a gift. And so once we started to really craft it, and so it's been like 5 years of being really consistent. You know, everyone is different. And once in a while we'll be like, that didn't fill us up. That didn't bring us the rest we need. And then sometimes it's like, oh Lord, that was just what we needed. I don't want it to end. I don't know. I just say all that to say it really does take work, but I think sometimes we're so resistant because it sounds like it was hard and more work when really it's so good. And
Well, if
you
and what do you think, Alyssa? Was that the initial hesitation in your heart, which I think is pretty paradigmatic? I think that's true for a lot of people, especially in kind of the stage of life you were in or even still are in. Was it just that it sounded like more work? Was there anything else deeper in there you think that was behind the hesitancy? I mean, I'd love to have you speak to that.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it seemed like, oh, in my weird, like when I get in my weird space and I compare us, I'm like, oh, you get to just check out, you get to read all day. And I'm like, I'm still being mom. So that feels unfair, which I realized that was totally
and we changed that in the beginning too. We're like, that was what I was doing and that wasn't helpful. My Sabbath was like, I'm gonna go read some books. Just let the house burn down, you know? And it was the best days of my life. But we've had to shape it and change it. And I would say practically too, because I want to make sure we don't skip over this because people are probably watching wondering, and then you can keep going, is the way we solve that, because you do have to kind of crack that nut somehow, or break that code with toddlers of like, how do you still rest when the toddlers just don't care? It's like they still need their butts wiped, they still need to be fed, you know what I mean? Like they need all that stuff. So one thing that's been really helpful for us is kind of like almost like shifts, like, so we would start seeing Saturday. We don't do it as much anymore because now we're at the age where the kids, it's fun and blah, blah, blah. But when the really early years, if you have babies or you feel like it's hard, I would say give yourself, make the Sabbath day the day where everyone gets a little bit of like dessert time. You know what I mean? Like, meaning like an hour, they each get like an hour each. Okay, you get it. Just go read a book, go for a walk all by yourself. I got the kids. You come in, tag out. You know what I mean? Or like all that. I think that anytime you do like shifts, specifically, I do think husbands really need to go after that for their wives. Wives are
100%
needed. They are being asked so much. We've done a whole bunch of stuff with that on family teams where it's like every cultural change that's happened over the last 200 years almost has always made it worse for the wife and made it better for everyone else. Right.
Wow.
Which is really fascinating, right? That, all of a sudden we're no longer multi-generational. Okay. Who takes that hit? The dad doesn't take that hit. The mom takes that hit, right? Because grandma's not around to help the rest of the family. Dad's down at the factory 100 years ago. So like you can go on and on where it's like the mom takes the hits of the cultural changes. And so like most moms are sinking, especially with young kids. And so like, man, husbands really take it upon you to like really do your best to just try to let them breathe, give them space, fill them up. And there's something about that. When you do that as a husband, the home just comes alive because it kind of trickles all the way down. But that's just a real quick practical, I'd say, but you can keep going.
Oh, yeah. Well, the only other thing I was going to say was I totally think in my heart, I have legalism. And so I just thought that I had to be checking off my boxes, had to be working for the Lord, whatever that looked like. I had to attain something to show at the end of the day, like, oh, look what I did. And Sabbath kind of just destroyed that. Or like that whole idea of not hustling or my identity is not in what I do. Like that just kind of blows it up. And so I think it really shows our inner hearts of where do we put where does our identity come from? What is our worth based in? And I think that's why I love, and I know we're talking a lot about Sabbath and your book is so much more than just that, but I love even just that practice because it kind of just shows your heart. And it's like, okay, the Lord loves you because he loves you, not because of what you do or don't do. And I feel like that alone is so worth pursuing it, to just, and it's like a constant every week. Oh yeah.
Yes.
Lord, I'm not in control. I don't have to try to gain control. The Lord holds everything together. I can rest, or I can just party. Like, you know,
yeah.
I think,
or both.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think too, theologically speaking, you know, we see it in Genesis, obviously, but we also see it in Exodus, you know, and the commands are always a little different, as you know. But the Exodus one is always very powerful to me because, you know, we know that Exodus is this covenantal moment where God's bringing out his people to kind of marry them in this covenantal ceremony. The 10 Commandments are kind of the vows at some level, to like reshape his people into who they, like, it's almost like the very beginning before they can be the light to the world. They need to be married and they need to be reshaped because
from slavery.
Yeah, and they almost have to have Egypt completely washed out of them, because they were out of Egypt, but Egypt was not out of them. You know, they were commodified, they were products, they were brick makers, they were people who never rested, right? And so I don't think it's a coincidence that one of the most paramount commands was the Sabbath command, because it's a reshaping, it's a command that'll reshape you. It'll literally reshape your identity to become you know, Yahweh's child, as opposed to a citizen of Egypt. And that's what it does. And so that will be painful, hard, difficult, complex, tension, etc. But I think seeing it like that is really helpful. It's like, it's a reshaping identity commandment that, understandably so, is difficult.
Yeah, you know, I've been thinking a lot. I mean, I could not have said it anywhere close to as good as both of you just said it, but I've been thinking a lot about the 10 Commandments lately. And I think I put this in the book. I was so struck months ago about the reality that the only practice or spiritual discipline or habit or rhythm, whatever you want to call it, that is in the 10 Commandments is Sabbath.
Yeah.
You know, there's no other, like, and make sure you read scripture.
Totally.
And remember to pray even, or remember to show up for synagogue. I mean, it's fascinating. Now, of course, scripture did not really exist yet, and synagogue wasn't yet. So, you know, but it's really interesting to me that that's the one practice or rhythm that is commanded at a moral level. And then I've been thinking lately about the 10 Commandments aren't really like, I mean, they're 10 commands, but they're not a list of 10 moral commands.
Totally.
The first 3 have to do with like your inner orientation toward God. I mean, there's some practical stuff in there around idols, but like a lot of it's about your inner orientation to God. Then you have Sabbath. Then you have the relational commands: murder, don't lie, don't, you know, steal, adultery. And then the last one is covetousness, which is about like an inner, not that it doesn't manifest in your behavior, but that's like an inner condition of the heart.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. The one practice that's commanded is Sabbath, and the one like interior heart posture thing toward the world that's commanded is do not covet. And I really think there's a connect there, you know, because Sabbath is the day, especially in traditional Jewish practice, where you don't buy or sell on the Sabbath. It's the day, because it's the day, not because buying and selling are bad, but because they have a place and then they have to have a limit, you know? And it's the day to be grateful for what you have. So maybe just teeing into that, you know, limits is such a fascinating thing. We live in a world, in particular since the Enlightenment, you know, well, really since Genesis chapter 3, that has wanted to transgress the limitations, be that the limitations of, you know, humanity and the garden and the knowledge of good and evil, all the way down to the limitations of the body and science. And, you know, I think one of the hidden graces in the travesty that is COVID-19 is it's a wake-up call to the West that we have limitations, you know, that we're not masters of our destiny. We don't control everything, that we're contingent, dependent, fragile creatures, which is not what any of us in the West want to believe. We self-deceive ourselves very easily, you know, until the wake-up call, whether it's cancer or COVID or whatever. But limitations are hard because we live in a culture that wants to transgress all limitations. So how do you guys, you know, some of my favorite part of your book, I loved the chapter on empathy. That was money. And I wish I'd put that in my book. But I also
it did feel random at first, but then it felt like it came, like it was necessary.
No, it was one of those like, dang it, I missed that in my rubric. It was really good. But my favorite, personally, just the most helpful chapter was your thing on saying no. And your insight that due to technology, and I love to have you riff on it, just how due to technology, more people have access to us than ever before.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I have a few thoughts, but mostly I just want to listen to you guys riff on what is saying no, like best practices for saying no at an emotional level of accepting your limitations, and then at a practical level of like Instagram and people that want to hang out from church and
Can I just preface it?
Aunt Susie or whatever.
Yes, exactly. Well, I think this is a good question because we've never answered this one together.
Jeff,
we're wildly different. And you know, you can joke about the Enneagram and stuff, you know, like I'm an 8, she's a 9. So that puts us at polar opposites of like, I have no problem just being like, no, this is how it's going to be. And it's a no for the next 10 years. I'm sorry, deal with it.
Jeff doesn't care what other people think.
Yeah. And she's the opposite where it's like to let someone down or to, you know, so it's, but it's cool because we've both still committed to the ethos of like, we have to be shrewd with our time. You know, you have to be. I really would love to hear your thoughts on this. My perspective on it is, like what you said, it hit me like 2 years ago that just like, it's really just a basic math formula of like, okay, the people in medieval times, the people during the Renaissance, people during scriptural times, no one had more than 24 hours. Like we have the exact same amount of time as them. Yet what has obviously grown is access, right? Or communication, or kind of false intimacy, or more relationships that are even humanly possible, you know, truthfully.
Even in our lifetime.
Totally. Yeah. And so if the hours haven't grown, right, but yet everything else has access, and with access comes asks, meaning like you can literally just be asked more questions than ever in human history because you're reachable, you're everywhere. And so that alone is just like you unless you are saying no more than people back then, you lose. Like it's pretty simple. Like, you don't have more time. You don't have, you know, and so like if this is growing and this isn't, then the only thing that can grow is that space where you also say no, right? Now there should still be a space where you say yes, right? And you steward your time well and you're honoring. Now dealing with that, so yeah, like I don't have a problem. I'm pretty shrewd with it of like, hey, I feel like this is what we're called to. Like I'm big on like priorities and like, you know, here's us, here's this, and like, yeah, I think this is a weird conversation, but it's like, are people okay just believing that they actually have no more time? Do you actually believe that your default should be no at a certain time? Can you reach a certain level of activity, relationships and stuff where just your default is no? Now the Holy Spirit should change that default sometimes to yeses, to be open, to be, you know, but like, do you just like, and I believe that sometimes there's seasons like right now, like I'm writing a book right now. So that's a default no season to me. So immediately when I get an email or something, it's a no. And unless I get a check in my spirit, or unless I got to ask the Lord about it, all that, but it's a default no. And a lot of us do the opposite. We default yes and have to be convinced to say no. But I'm like, well, my time's full, right? I'm pouring into the kids as much as I want to, you know, hopefully working on the marriage as much as I want to, spending all the time on my book that I can, you know, doing those things. And all of a sudden, oh, day's over. Like that's just literally math. Like, I'm sorry. And I can get snarky where I think I say in the book, you know, like, hey, tell me which one of those things you want me to take out. And then you can jump in there, you know, hey, how about you want to take away the date night for me and my wife? Then sure, you can have that coffee date, you know? And Alyssa's like that too. I'm joking. So that, but one thing I would say is this is almost a spiritual practice because you have to hold that really well with this. You have to be open to possibilities that the Spirit tells you to be open to. You have to be open to human interaction, human relationship. And I make the argument in the book, because this is where some people conflated this, that got me a little frustrated. But I make the argument in the book that I'm that shrewd with my nose so that I actually can pay attention more to when the Spirit wants me to release time. Do you know what I mean? Like, because if you're just saying yes to everything, you're burnt out, you're taxed, you're drowning, you're sinking. And now mentally, you're not even in a space to be even open and available to what the Holy Spirit has for you, right?
Wow.
And so for us, putting margin on our calendar, like if you spent your time like how you spent your money, you know, you would go time bankrupt instantly. You know what I mean? I mean, you go bankrupt financially, right? It's like no one says, yes, spend every dollar you have zero emergency fund, have no savings, right? And see how well that goes for you. Like no one says that, but that's what we do with our time. Right? No emergency fund, no extra space that we can spend when we need it. And so we try to build, I know it's weird, but we try to like, what does that look like? Can we put an hour, couple blocks in our week that's just nothing time, that's connection time, that's whole, like literally maybe just get to that block every week and say, Holy Spirit, what do you want me to do? Maybe it's get in the car, go talk to someone. Maybe it's go knock on your neighbor's door. Maybe it's spend that time with your kids. But we don't build that in. And so all that put together is kind of how we process it. But I would love to hear, how do you deal with that with, you know, from them with different personality?
Yeah, well, and I joke about Jeff and his personality and being able to say no very easily, but really I feel like Jeff is a pastor to me, and a lot of the times I will run everything by, not that he's like a lord of me or whatever, but I just have to run things by him because I don't trust myself a lot of times. Like, hey, I got invited to do this. Do you think this is wise? And I think because he knows me so well, he could be like, yeah, I don't think that would be best for you, or I think you need to say no. Like, I remember, this might sound so silly, but when we had our 2 youngest, so they were like 2 and a baby, nap time every day, that's when I would go grocery shopping, or I'd go shopping, or just like go run all my errands. And then after a while, every time I would come back from running errands, I would just have a breakdown. I would be like exhausted. I would not be enjoyable to be around. And so finally Jeff was like,
it's all downhill from there at dinner.
So finally Jeff was like, you're not allowed to go out at nap time. Like, that is not a wise decision for you. And I fought against it.
Just trying to squeeze it in too much.
Yeah. And I fought against it because I was like, no, it makes sense. Like, I'm being diligent with my time. You know, I can be the best mom, but still get things done. And after like a year of not going out, I'm like, oh, thank you. Like, this is so much better for me personally in my like, just, I'm a much better mom. I'm a much better wife. I just like being at home and not trying to fill up every spare minute. And so I'm really thankful for Jeff and his wisdom in that. And a lot of times it's just praying, like what he was saying, like, Spirit, is this wise for me to do? And I think one thing that Jeff taught me, which what you said that's so big, is like, I feel like a lot of times women, we feel like if we get invited somewhere to do something, we have to have a legit excuse if we can't make it. Like, oh, I can't because, you know, we already got asked to go to dinner at someone's house or whatever. Instead, where we can just literally say like, oh, I can't make it. Like, and if there's nothing on your calendar, that's okay. You don't have to explain why you can't make it. Like, that could just be time. Like, you just know you need to be at home, or you need to say no, or you just need to be at home watching a show with your kids for a half hour. So I think that was really freeing for me to realize, oh, I don't always have to have.
And no one asks for a reason.
I can have nothing on my calendar and have no reason.
And no one asks for a reason. Like, if you have a good community and friends, we do that and they do that. And you're just like, you just say, oh, I can't make it. What about next time? As long as you're kind of showing that, like, I want to be with you, like, it's good, you know? But I think we do get in our heads of like having it to be the best reason. If we don't have a really good reason, we can't say no. And so, I forget what the phrase for it is. You probably know, and I talked about it in my book, but I can't think of it off the top of my head of, and then the big problem too we do in the West is there's that psychological term where you believe future time is way larger than present time, you know? So like an hour a year from now, you think is like a giant watermelon, when an hour today is like an M&M, you know what I mean? But it's the same hour. And so I forget what that is, but there's actually something in our brain where you just think time is larger, bigger, more available in the future. And so even if it's a week from now, and so you always kind of compensate or over give yourself to future time, which is very interesting. That's a hard discipline to make.
Can I just add one more thing? I think one thing that's really helped me personally is taking each season. So maybe it's like the fall or the winter or a month or whatever it is, and just really sitting with the Lord and asking him, Lord, what do you have for me in this season? What do you want me to be about? What do you want me to be committed to? And what do you want me to let go? And then just writing it out and being committed to it. And so then when requests come in or thoughts I have come in, I can filter it through that and be like, nope, that's just not what the Lord has for me this season. Like, maybe next season or whatever. But I feel like when I'm seeking the Lord and I know where he has me, then it allows me to be confident to
what to say yes to,
and what to say no to, and my limitations. And I totally get that. And this is a whole nother thing, but I feel like this last year I was faced with, I have limitations. Like, I have a lot of weaknesses, and that's okay. And that's actually what draws me closer to the Lord and makes me rely on him more. But man, it's a struggle to finally realize I'm limited. I can't do everything. I can't be everything to everyone and do it all.
Would you just explore that for a minute? You know, I think I can tell there's iceberg underneath there, you know, I mean, let us into whatever you want or don't. You know, I think that's something that, especially as people near their mid to late 30s, they start realizing, you know, developmental psychologists call it the crisis of limitation. You're obviously not at a crisis, but you start to realize, oh, life isn't just one endless quest of upward mobility, you know, of more and more and more. Like, you start to bump into all sorts of limitations, and emotional in particular are my primary limitations. But would you just explore that just for a minute?
Yeah. Well, I think I would love to I wish we could just sit down to dinner and I could ask you all the questions. But I think there's so much more that I'm still processing, but I feel like this last year, I finally came to a point where I was like, we had our third child, and within last year with having a newborn, it was just a really hard year. And I really came to face like my limitations, and that I had to say no to a lot of people because it just wasn't emotional. Like I just had to be home and be prayerful and fight the battle that the Lord had for us. And so facing that, and then also facing this like new season of the ordinary and the mundane, and being content in that, and learning to embrace faithfulness, and that I don't know, there's just a lot of identity crisis kind of things, like who am I? Why did God create me? What is my purpose? And that my life doesn't look like her life, like, and that's okay. And it looks like on Instagram, it looks like she can do a bunch of things and her plate is really full. And I think my whole life I've like tried to be her. I've tried to have a big plate like her. And the reality is, the way the Lord's made me, like my plate is a lot smaller. And so learning what I can handle and being content with that, learning my weaknesses and limitations, and like simple things like I can't stay up late and I can't wake up at 4 writing a book because I actually become a hot mess. Like, and then like little things like that.
Some people can, yeah.
And some people can, little things like that. But then also like really big things, like, I don't know, I can't think of things off the top of my head, but just learning to embrace my weaknesses. And then when I am weak, then that's when God's power really is strong. And I think I struggle with that in my motherhood, just learning like, oh, I'm not always gracious. I'm not always patient. I lose it sometimes with my kids, or I get really frustrated. And this is like a whole nother thing, but I think for so long I tried to be perfect, and like I needed to be Christ to them. Like I wanted to show them this like perfect parent, when instead I was showing them like the grace of the Lord, and coming to them and just asking for forgiveness and being like, mommy can't, even today I've had a breakdown because I was like, I feel like I can't be everything that everyone in my family needs right now. Like I just can't do it.
I was on that list.
And Jeff was on that list. I was like,
she's highly needed. She's a high value asset, as they say in the Navy SEALs, right?
I feel like I was up to my limits, and then the Lord whispered to me, Alyssa, you don't have to, like that. Yeah. Just let me step in. Like I can't feel the emotional needs of my 6-year-old right now. Let me pour into her, pray for her, like be a warm hug to her and just pray for her, and let me step in. And so learning to really trust the Lord, that I don't have control, and I can trust his power and ability, and rest in his.
Well, and the only thing I would add is the terrible analogy or metaphor. It's the only one I could think of, but it's true. There's something about when you aren't embracing your limits that's like serious spiritual constipation. Like you get to those moments and you're trying to, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like, but there's something when you do embrace limits, you feel it. You like it's flowing. But you know what I mean? Like it changes. And I think it's true though. I couldn't think of a better one, but it's true. There's something about the lightness, the freeness, the freedom of like when you release that limitation thing, or when you embrace them, it actually becomes, your weaknesses don't fall in on you. I think that's what a lot of people think. They think that the weaknesses are just going to crash you in, when it actually just, I don't know, it makes you more light and free and more dependent on Jesus. So yeah, I think that's so good.
Yeah, it's interesting, both of you, but Alyssa in particular, how you're tied both Sabbath and saying no to your own identity and your sense of self-worth. You didn't use that language, maybe it's not the best language, but your sense of self. I've been I'm teaching the next couple of weeks. So in our new weird digital reality, I like teach on Sundays, and then it comes out on Sundays. So this coming Sunday's on something else, but I'm already working on the next week. And the next 2 teachings, we're in a practice on simplicity, like a, kind of 8-week long teaching series on simplicity, very in-depth. And next week I'm teaching on simplicity of speech, which is like a foreign concept, even to me. The first time I read it, I was like, what does that even mean? But in all the historic way of Jesus literature around simplicity, it's like it plays a central role. And then the week after that, I'm teaching on simplicity of apparel or dress or clothing. And I'm just really awake to, with both of those things, the ways that we use language and clothing to manipulate other people to get what we want. what one writer I read called impression management, to get people to think well of us, or think we're attractive or smart, or we have status, or we're sophisticated, or we're athletic. We all have different values, you know? And then in particular, clothing, the way that we are manipulated by other people. I mean, fashion is just like a gross, like, I mean, it's hyper manipulative. Why does fashion change, you know, every season, every year?
So much, we hold it so much core to our identity more than we think.
It's we call it art, and of course there's art in fashion, but a lot of it is just full on capitalism. It's just planned obsolescence, you know. Oh, that's not cool anymore, we need to change it, you know. So all that to say, I'm just so aware. I was reading, you know, in Dallas Willard, in his book Life Without Lack, in his chapter on death to self, he addresses the objection, hey, if you embrace a life of self-denial, won't that make you a doormat? You know what I mean? And what about the oppressed, or women, or minorities, or people that haven't had power in the past? Will that make people just walk all over them? And he says it's actually the opposite, that people who don't need your approval or to have you to have a high opinion of them are the hardest people to manipulate.
Totally.
Because they don't need you to like them.
And super powerful at some
approve
level.
of them. Yeah, so he basically said, if you can die to the need to be approved of and liked and accepted by other people, other than, he wasn't saying like in an obstinate, unkind way, but in a, you know, that you actually can become like a boulder in a river, like this unmovable anchor point of good in the world, you know? So it's interesting, you know, how this brings up in you, Alyssa, and because I feel it in my own life, you know, with Sabbath, less so, but maybe that's just because it's so in my body at a cellular level now. But with saying no, it's like all of my Enneagram 1
totally who you want to be, what you want them to think.
Yes, pastoral expectations. And it's like all of my stuff is like, I'm a bad person if somebody is upset with me for not doing a thing they think I should do. I'm bad, you know? And it, like, that's my inner psychosis. And I just, it's hard for me to even imagine what could my life be like if I was okay. If my sense of love and didn't come from another person's expectation on my life, but came from God's expectation on my life, you know, which is an easy yoke.
That's so true.
I'd love to hear you guys just keep riffing on, would you tell us the story for anybody that doesn't know about what you guys do? I think it's every year where you put all your activities,
the note cards,
the note cards or stickies or whatever.
Totally.
Because I want to move a little bit from the metaphors of constipation.
Totally. How do we actually practically do this? Totally.
and the inner stuff to like.
Totally.
You gave us some really practical stuff on Sabbath. Give us some really practical stuff on like simplicity. Saying
that's
no.
my favorite comment on some videos we do, our podcast too, of like, but how do you do that? You know? And Alyssa's really.
It's always up here on the 30.
No, that's not a criticism at all.
No, but Alyssa's actually really good at that. Even on our podcast, people that watch who listen to us, if you listen consistently, know that Alyssa plays that part a lot. She was like, but it's the worst when I'll go on like a 10-minute, hopefully meaningful kind of deep thought. And then she goes, but what does that actually mean? Or why should I care?
Well, I won't say that. I'll just be like, can you give me an example? And he's like, no, you can figure that out.
Yeah, I'm like, no, figure that out on your own. But no, yeah. So you do have to, here's one thing I'll say too, you know, when you are swimming with the pace of culture, all you have to do is sit and you will float down river, right? Like to go down river, to go with a current, to go with everyone else, just like in a river, all you do is sit in a tube, meaning no effort, takes no work. You just sit there and you will go down river, like most of us are, with more hustle, more hurry, all that stuff. But if you want to go upriver, you have to get off of the inner tube and actually like exert effort, right? It's a totally different mechanism. If you have to walk consistently, intentionally with a plan. So first of all, see it like that, get a plan together, think about what that would look like, get a whiteboard out, get some poster board out. There's one thing I would say, I won't break this one down because there's a million examples, but I think this one really unlocked a lot for me of just treat your family, your marriage, or your young adulthood or your professionalhood as a business. We so have a lot of categories and mechanisms for how businesses should operate that are the shrewdness we need in our real lives, right? Now, there's a lot of crap in business that's not good, but there's a lot of just like, you will like, imagine a business is just like, I'll just do whatever. We have no mission. We have nothing important. We don't know what we're going to create, but we're just here, you know, like,
and we're awesome.
That company's going bankrupt next year, right? And it's like, same with us. Like so many of us are about to go bankrupt because it's like, no, they have mission, vision. They're high storytelling cultures, right? You go into any lobby of any successful business, what's on the wall? It's 15 pictures with like a line that says 1942, 1967, 1989.
Yeah.
You want to actually be compelled with intentionality, learn the story that's way bigger than you, whether that's your actual family story, maybe it's a mission story that you have. So that actually is a practical one of just like tell stories, be in a story. But the note card thing, and I'll let Alyssa break it down more, is a really helpful thing of if you're having struggle with the no, the yes, or just how to just pare down to live, to flourish. That's really what it is. One helpful practice is every year get sticky notes, get note cards, and put, like for us, I think it's usually 10 or 15 things end up on the cards of like your highest commitments, and kind of like core level identities too. So like, ours would be, on these note cards, one note card would say author, one would say author for her. One would say, our small group that we're a part of. One would say, attending church and being part of a church community. One would maybe even say, our kids don't play sports yet, but like it'd be like soccer practice on Thursdays, whatever, just like kind of high level commitments, not every little commitment you have in the weeds, but the ones that you think of the big ones quick. Put those all on note cards, put them on the table or put them somewhere, and then tell yourself, okay, for next year, we have not committed to anything yet. It's a blank slate for next year. And we're going to ask the Lord which cards to pick up. And that is a radically different practice than us assuming because what happens is we accumulate crap, right? And that's actual stuff, but it's true with commitments. So all of a sudden we're 10 years in and our back is just heavy because we've accumulated so much stuff and we've never actually taken a stop at the train stop and had an opportunity to get off. You know what I mean? And so what I would say is like,
I love that line that you just said. I'm stealing that for a sermon in 2 weeks if I can have your permission.
But it's true. Like we don't actually we don't stop at the station,
Not that line. That line's great too. But you said that we accumulate, I forget the word you used.
Yeah, we just accumulate
activities, the way that we commitments.
Accumulate stuff.
The way that because especially as parents, like, kids are just flypaper for crap you don't need, so if you're trying to do like the minimalism life with 3 kids.
No, exactly. And here's another.
It's a secret. Tell me what it is. You come into our house and it's like so minimalist and calm, and you're like, wow, you have barely any things and so thoughtful. And then you open our kids' room and it's just like, ah.
Yeah, right. No, it's true, man. With toddlers, but we try to be simple too. It's so hard.
Like once you have a family, like stuff just accumulates. You get random stuff here, you pick up a thing here, somebody gives you a free sweatshirt. Next thing you know, like you're just overcrowded.
100%.
And the same thing happens with commitments.
Yes, 100%. I think and it needs to be thought through the same way. And what you do is it just gives you a chance to get off the station. Like I said, like you can say, no, like we're not going to pick that back up. Now, most of the time you pick most of it back up because like, I want to be part of a church. I want to be part of a small group. I want to have our date night still, all these different things. But there's something about it, just the mechanism of it, giving yourself the opportunity to ask the Lord, like, it's kind of like actually asking him, like, should I pick that up?
Yes.
Right. And if you feel a check in your spirit or something, then like, you really need to hunt that down and see what's going on there. Because a lot of times we don't give ourselves that opportunity, And so I feel like, another going with the accumulation thing that I think is helpful. Another way to think about it, a word picture is like, kind of like how you can accumulate so much crap in a house, but what do you do when you move? Most people just go crazy of throwing stuff away when they move. You know what I mean? Like you start moving and you're like, we're not taking all this crap with us. That's gone, that's gone, that's gone, that's gone. That stuff goes in a box, right? And it's the same thing. So every year, pretend you're moving a metaphorical house and you're going to bring a lot of the same stuff with you, right? But you're moving. And so there's something with that where philosophically it totally
there's a shift. Yeah, Pete Gregg this morning had a great little like leadership post, and at the end he recommended an exercise where he was writing to pastors and leaders, but he recommended that you resign from your job. Like, I'm sorry, not that you resign, but that you write yourself a resignation letter.
Yes.
And then he said, and this
be like prepared to turn it in.
Charismatic pastors.
Convince yourself out of it.
And he said, then ask the Lord if he'd like to rehire you for the job.
Yes, 100%. So it's exactly that. So,
and he wasn't saying quit. He was saying, maybe you quit, but that inner, like, it was actually in context writing about detachment and how important detachment is for leaders and just in spiritual formation. Like coming to that place of kind of a dispassionate detachment. We're like, okay, I don't have to do soccer on Thursday night. I don't have to be in this book club. I don't have to volunteer for this thing. Let's put it on the table and ask God if we're supposed to keep doing it,
What I would say too, like we do this thing called a family summit. We've been doing that for 4 or 5 years. And it's like, it looks different every year, but I feel like, a day, 2 days, some type of space at the end of the year where you basically, just like a business again, because no business would survive without looking back on like, how did we do? How did we do? right? What were the quarterly numbers? What did we actually make? What did it sell, for the business? But for a family, it's like, how did we actually do? How did our money get spent spiritually? What was the word of the year? Did we come true with that? Did we stand in that? Did we not? Did we feel burned out? Like one fun thing too, is at the beginning of all our summits, we do like story of the year, and we do it separately where we just try to say like, what would you, in 2 minutes, how would you summarize the story that the Bethkes had last
that's
year?
a great idea.
Different sometimes, which is fascinating. Like, it's very fascinating to get to that day and be like, oh, I'm telling a real different story last year. You know what I mean? So, but that stuff
optimism.
Totally.
Not so much.
But you jump in though. Like, how do we process that? How do you feel like, even as a wife or a mom or woman, just that we step into those conversations, decisions, just like, staying shrewd with commitments, how do we keep it really practical? The summit, the note card thing.
Yeah, I don't know if I have that much to add. I feel like, the summit every year, remembering the past year, looking forward to the next, and putting out the note cards. And I love what you said, John Mark, just like your job's in part of that, and so just laying it all out on the table and having open hands to just ask the Lord, hey, what do you want our family to be about this next year? What do you want us to be committed to? But as you guys were talking, I just was thinking that doesn't have to be an end of a year thing. I feel like during the season of COVID.
Well, we do it at the end of every week almost too now. Yeah.
That's true. We do. We have we have a business meeting every Sunday night where we just plan for the week ahead, say everything on the calendar, and we ask each other, how can we serve one another this week? What do you need? Just like what's on your heart, how can we be praying for you? So that.
But we started incorporating a look back the last couple months that totally changed it too. We actually, instead of just looking forward, which is usually just high aspiration, we now just look back and say, where was the biggest breakdown? Let's just not do that again next week. And all of a sudden, if you do that,
problem solve that.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, when you do that, you're on fire a year in, you know what I mean? Because like kill the breakdown. If you're killing a breakdown every single week or trying to, that usually goes a lot better than just high aspiration,
Yeah.
Wow, that's gold.
So that's been really good. And I think just allowing the freedom to, I think sometimes we don't want to treat our families like businesses because that sounds so unromantic. It sounds so unidealistic and like we work enough, like we're just the family. This is our rest place. But really we have to run it like a business and be proactive. I think a lot of times we're reactive. We just react to whatever is going on, the in-laws, the jobs, the school. Instead
the internet, TV,
how we're feeling that day, instead of really like being proactive of what do we want this week? How can we craft this week? How can we craft this season, this year to like be about the things that the Lord is calling us to be about what we feel our family values and what we want to be a part of. And I just
what I'm hearing you say isn't like business like in a crass commercial sense. I'm just hearing
just intentionality,
you say, bring
vision.
Intentionality. Your vision, try to discipline yourself to live in alignment with your deepest desires. I mean, I read a great article recently. I read this book a while ago that was super interesting that basically argued that feminism takes credit for what the knowledge economy has mostly done as far as raising the rights and the equality of women. Then it said the main problem still in kind of workplace inequality is that careers require people to work like single men. So it requires dads to work like they're single, and therefore it requires a mom to work like a single man,
Yes.
And that just doesn't work. It doesn't even work if you're a dad. It definitely doesn't work if you're a woman, And so my pastoral experience is I'm always shocked at how in my own life, I will tend to prioritize work over everything else. And I'm surprised pastorally at how often people bring a high degree of intentionality, passion, vision, discipline to their career, and then often almost nothing to family, emotional health, spiritual formation. It's like all of a sudden when they get off work, they've given all their best energies to that. And then it's just kind of Netflix and pizza, you know what I mean? Or whatever. That's a true stereotype, but I'm always surprised. What if we were to bring even some of that energy and intentionality to our marriage, to our parenting, to our formation, our prayer life, to our community with Jesus, to our physical health, you know what I mean? Like,
well, what I think too is this one is where I start getting into stuff that I get really excited about, but can't get into it too much. But I mean, that was one of the biggest shifts with the Industrial Revolution. And then you get all the way to early 1900s with the vehicle, planned obsolescence, like you were saying, stuff like that. That one of the biggest shifts that actually happened is a society who mainly produces has now turned into a society who mainly consumes, right? And a society who mainly produces always centers in micro economies of households. So you can't have a society of production at a really creative, impactful way, not like the factory just spewing out crap way, unless basically every house was its own business back then, right? And not just the business of producing things, but like it was this orbiting force, right, of a team and dynamic, and it was powerful. And some were, in agriculture, some were blacksmiths, some were in this, but like
merchants.
We've almost all devolved into terrible characters of ourselves. We actually look like and what I mean by that is like we look back 100 years ago on the mom back then, and certainly yes, with some certain oppression, certain rights, and all that. I'm so glad we're past that. But in general, I don't think we actually give credence to the truth that they were way more girl bosses back then than they are now.
They were.
Like we've devolved into characters of singularities. When like a mom over a household 100 years ago was basically a CEO. Like you have no idea. The scriptures
running a small business.
Yes, household. And so the scripture uses this word household.
Division of labor was mostly based upon body type and size. Like if you're a farmer and the man who is statistically likely to be bigger and stronger than the woman, statistically, not always, he's likely going to be the one out with the horse plowing the field, and she's likely going to be the one doing the quilt. But it doesn't have to be oppression related. You know what I mean?
And it's team oriented. It's dynamic. There's different roles. Everyone's on fire, producing, serving, creating, as a together. But we've individualized so much. And Wendell Berry has this amazing quote where he basically, paraphrase it, where he basically says, the consumer economy is terrible because what it basically does is you begin to consume yourself. It's like you can only consume so much until you consume yourself. And he says marriage is the same thing. A marriage. What does he say? He goes, marriages are basically just prolonged divorces now, because all they are is just an argument over who gets what stuff and who gets to consume what stuff. And that's why he's like such a prophet. But it's true.
That's not convicting at all.
Right? He basically says we're kind of play acting divorces, where the same thing you do in a real divorce is actually what most people do in their marriages. You just argue over who gets what stuff and who gets to consume what they want. And which is what happen, in the lawyer's boardroom at the end in divorces. Usually. And so, so like households as really strong, and that we conflate that too. We think household and we think mom, dad, 2 kids. The word household outside of pre-1850 was usually 50 people, 25 people, sometimes 150 people. It was, so you can go all the way farther back, it was servants, it was certain people that took care of things. It was even soldiers and men at some time. One of my favorite passages is, Abraham was like the household of all households. Literally, there's just that one little verse in Genesis where it says, he's all upset and wants to go chase and help get Lot. And he says, and he grabs 300 men from his household. like he didn't gather them up or call the church or whatever. It says literally the dude had 300 men in his back pocket on his property, just waiting to be activated to go get Lot. You know what I mean? Like that's an empire. Like households were empires, small corporations. And we've so lost that I think, that does a lot of damage with how we think about these conversations.
And that's a big part of your guys' work with family teams, right? And your passion is kind of recapturing a vision for a multi-generational family. You know what I mean? What would it look like? Not just husband, wife, and the kids, but
totally.
You know what I mean?
Did you read that Nuclear Family is a Mistake article, David Brooks?
Yeah, there was definitely.
I didn't love the end. I didn't love the end, but his diagnosis was fire.
There were a couple things. I think he was way too positive. I don't think he was dealing with the reality of divorce and single parent families. Totally. But overall,
but his diagnosis of like the historical side.
Yes, so good. And oh gosh, and so for those of you listening, it's a long form read, so it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes to read it. But I think it's called. What's it called?
I think it's called Why the Nuclear Family Was a Mistake, or The Nuclear Family is a Mistake.
Something like that. If you Google David Brooks Nuclear Family Mistake, it's excellent. So but we've been thinking that, and a lot of people have basically said, hey, Brooks, that's what the church is. It's a,
exactly.
It's a multi-generational kinship group, totally. Is his term, that is the church. And we've been doing that for a very long time, especially smaller churches, which do this so incredibly well. But we've been so captivated by that idea, and really just even trying to figure out how we could do that in Portland. We're literally, I had a conversation with my parents last week about how do we do this? Who could we bring in? What would that group look like? And how do we create hospitality and, you know.
Well, and even what's that psalm, and because I want to too, and this is another thing we conflate that frustrates me, but I want to encourage people with this is we hear stuff like this a lot of times, and single people, young professionals, young adults say, oh, that's family stuff, I'm out, that's not for me. Right. It's like, no. When we say the word family, we mean last name. So like you could be single, old, young, kid, whatever, you are in a family. You are in a multi-generational team and story that God placed you in. Now, how is that going to work? That's different for every single person. But like, we do not mean the nuclear family when we say that word.
Yeah, it's actually
this household, this
more
economy,
important for single people or divorced people, or you know what I mean. Almost.
Well, that's what I think it's the Psalm verse where he says like something about that. There's that Psalm verse where he says that something about a household or a home is where the solitary find refuge or something like that. And it's basically
he sets the solitary in a home.
Exactly. Thank you. I mean, you have the whole scripture.
Oh, I'm sorry. No. He sets, I
just
love it because as an adoptive parent, I love that scripture. It's he set the solitary in families.
But that's God's vision, man. That's God's vision, is that there would be no isolation. There would be no young professionals, young adults on an island, but that everyone would be orbiting in some type of household economy. That will look different for everyone, but just like you're in this kind of a dynamic thing.
Oh, so amazing. All right. Well, I want to respect your guys' time and maybe get you 5 minutes of nap time to relax, decompress. How about we do just like 3-5 questions and then call it a night? Does that sound good?
It's perfect. And by the way, I got to give a shout out to Lauren Winter, which I believe I've seen you on Family Team stuff, I think, but and seen you around our community, but she's posting everything. She's posted Family Teams link. She posted the Atlantic article link in Facebook. She's just, Lauren, anything we mentioned, she's just hollering at the people down in the comments. So Lauren, you're amazing.
She's killing it. So Lauren, let's start with your question, because she asked a question a few minutes ago.
Oh, she deserves it.
You have more than earned an answer, Lauren Winter, about what Dallas Willard book to start with, because they're all so hard to read. I would say,
yes, I agree.
2 different options. One is his little book, The Great Omission. Here's why. Because it's not actually a full-length book. It's a 50-page book and then a collection of essays on spiritual formation. So you can read his 50 pages, and it's not as hard as some of his other stuff. And even if it is hard, anybody can get through 50 pages. And then you can kind of get the gist of his rubric of thought. And then after that, you can either not read any of the other chapters or essays, or you can just, a bunch of them overlap. You can read a couple, read ones that jump out to you. And then the easiest book by him to read is Life Without Lack, which is the one that I was referencing, where it was written posthumously, and it was written by a ghostwriter, and it's based on his Sunday school talk that he did years ago. So it's much easier to read. It's not as paradigmatic as his other work. It's almost like an intellectual devotional work. Yeah. And there's some really good stuff in that. And then probably the first foray into his serious work that is the most accessible is his book, Renovation of the Heart, which is kind of his fusion of spirituality and psychology. And then his most important books are the ones that are hardest to read. So save those for later, you know?
Which I agree. The classic Divine Conspiracy and all that, it's so good, but
that was hard.
And it's not even, there's some people's just author cadences where I just don't love. I don't love their kind of, the way they're kind of going at it.
His 2 most important books are Divine Conspiracy and The Spirit of the Disciplines, but they are so hard. I read Divine Conspiracy every year. I'm reading it right now. Yeah. And man, it is hard. Spirit of the Disciplines, I don't think I even started to understand it until at the end of the second read through. You know, it was just so hard for me to get my head around. And then it's changed my whole life. We've literally rebuilt our whole church because of that book. But man, I'm still he's definitely just a wee bit smarter than I am.
Yes.
Thank you, Dallas. Yeah.
Can't even imagine.
Oh goodness. So anyway, that's what I recommend. Any other questions? Let me see here.
Are you on Facebook pulling them up? You got them?
Yeah. Adam Dollar, advice for Sabbathing as a pastor as a part of a church who has services on Saturday and Sunday. Yeah. I mean, first off, we used to do Saturday night services and never again. So if you're in any perspective where you can
cancel those.
Yeah. I mean, we Sabbath, I think I'd love to hear when you guys do it, Jeff, but for most people, Sunday is by far the best day.
Yeah.
We Sabbath on Friday night through Saturday night, not because we think you have to do the Jewish time scale, but just because Sunday is a long work day for me. And I think it was Marva Dawn that got me thinking this way years ago in her little book, Keeping the Sabbath Holy, which is great. And she's a single woman, so it's nice to hear about Sabbath from the perspective of a single woman,
Mm-hmm.
very good writer. And she makes a strong case for always starting at night, even if it's like not with dinner, just
100%. I
before
would
you
say
go
that.
to bed.
Yeah.
She said,
There's
even if
something
it's
about
like,
starting with a night or a dinner
yes,
and some candles versus what day.
yes.
100%.
So she's like, even if you can't do dinner at 6 p.m., you don't start till 9, light a candle,
Yep.
say a prayer and fall asleep, you know,
Yeah.
but start at night. And
100%.
so, and in Jewish theology, you know, in biblical theology, the day starts with sundown, not at sunrise, like in Western culture. So there's something there where the day starts with rest. So yeah, I would just encourage you to start Friday night and go through. I used to have Friday, Saturday off, and we'd Sabbath on Friday when the kids were little. We'd Sabbath Thursday night to Friday, which worked great. But when our kids got older and were in school, we wanted them to participate, so we had to shift to Friday night, Saturday, so that they could participate. When is it Saturday?
Yeah, Friday to Saturday. So we kind of start with a Friday. Yeah, we kind of call it a big Shabbat dinner Friday night. Her parents come over every Friday. We kind of put them on the hot seat, let the kids ask them questions, storytelling and all that. And you don't have to do that until I think you get better. We kind of stayed insular with our Sabbath until we got, I think, in a practice of it. Then I think it is a really sweet environment and really rich environment to invite people in once you kind of, it's a little bit more autopilot.
Yeah.
But yeah, this Friday to Saturday. And I totally agree. I don't think it matters on the day. And I don't even think it matters if you do start at night, but highly recommend that starting at night just does something different. There's something about, for us, placing it on a dinner or placing it at like a nighttime candle thing just does something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially in the era of Zoom, it's more important to have a beginning and ending ritual than ever.
100%.
You know, because did you guys read that that BBC article everybody's passing around, or at least in my little world of, I forget what the title is. It's something like
the Zoom fatigue on the brain.
It's like the science behind Zoom fatigue.
But what I would recommend is, have you read Kurt Thompson's article from 2 weeks ago that was similar?
Yes.
But from I love that one better. But
yes, that was even better. But the BBC one had this great doctor who said, like, imagine if you went to a bar and you met your professor there, and then you met your parents there,
yes,
and then you met your date there.
It's disorienting.
You had a staff meeting there,
and then you had a book club there.
Then you had a book club there, and there was because we're used to like different relationships go in different spaces, and now all of that's gone. So
we don't realize how liturgical we are and how tied we are to symbols, smells, spaces, looks. And there's something about, you don't realize how much your brain is having bells go off with certain rooms, certain smells, certain houses. And when everything is technically telling your brain it's the same thing, but it's not the same thing with different people, like you said, that actually messes with you.
Why don't you guys pick another question or two? Maybe Alyssa, you want to pick one or?
Pick one down here.
You pick it and I'll answer. Or I'll help you answer.
There was one that was up high that I think, because now a lot of people are asking really good Sabbath ones. We could let's dive into some of those if we have more time. But I would also say we got lots on there. Family Team's Instagram has a whole Sabbath highlight. Me and Alyssa did an entire 45-minute podcast episode called Sabbath Q&A, where we literally do like the very practical what about, I think a couple of months ago on Real Life Podcast. Go look at that. John Mark's couple chapters and all the teachings and practices there. We have a chapter in our book. Like, there's so much Sabbath stuff. So amazing, but I would push you to all that stuff. What I would say, there was one that was, I don't remember who it was, but it was a good one a couple minutes ago. They said, how do you either say no or live in this slowness of Jesus without feeling or knowing if you're being lazy? I thought that was a really good one, right? What I would say there, because that is a prominent question, especially for more achievement-oriented, kind of driven people, they almost have this fear. And there was a cousin question to that just 2 seconds ago by someone who said, kind of like, I'm a young adult, and I feel like because I'm single and don't have a family, I feel like I need to really use my time or else it's wasting it.
Right.
So put those together. What I would say is, you're lazy when you're not coming alive, right? If you're not flourishing and you're not just like coming alive at a soul level, then you probably need to relook at maybe your practices, how your time's being spent. But if you're resting or you're doing something that maybe feels not in line with American work culture, but it's farther back than that, and it's at the pace of Jesus, and you're coming alive, I feel like there's no way that you're being lazy. Like if you're, and because what laziness does is it does hurt, damage, and kind of inflict on your image bearingness, meaning you are a prolific creator, lowercase c in the image of the uppercase C. Like you're a creator, you're dynamic, we're meant to create and to cultivate and to bring order and beauty out of chaos and to go from the garden to the city, to take, your language. And so we are created for that, but that should make us come alive. So if you're not coming alive with how busy you are, then you're probably doing it wrong. And if you're slowing down and not coming alive, then you're probably doing it wrong. There's something about you become your full self. So I don't know if I know it's a little bit subjective, but I feel like people know of like, oh, I'm coming alive in this, or I'm feeling dead. I'm feeling, would you say anything to that?
Just a couple of thoughts. I think it's a journey of learning like what makes me come alive, what fills me up. I think it takes a while to learn that. Part of me is like, if you are in your 30s and have young kids, I don't think it's possible to be lazy.
I do think some people that ask this question, I'm like, you're light years. Light years away from that.
I feel like the thinking itself, it's like, oh, let's just learn about rest. Like that's a gift. Let's step into that. You're not being lazy. And sometimes sometimes laziness, this is going to sound weird, but I think sometimes God wants us to be lazy. Like he wants us to have or little like days or hours where you do nothing. Yes. Like, and that's
you're not getting an ROI on your behavior. You're not just like extracting all the value.
There have been some Sabbaths where I have not changed out of my pajamas. I've pretty much been wrapped up in a blanket all day. And I'm like, that was the best day ever. Thank you, Lord. So, but yeah, I think one thing that I was thinking of when you're saying that, like, I think sometimes when it shows me my laziness or whatever, that heart posture that I know isn't filling me up or giving me life, but draining me, it's when I'm consuming so much. And so I need to create. And so like, instead of going on Instagram and looking at everyone's stories and then buying everything on Amazon, it's like, oh, let me just sit down and watercolor for a little bit or do things that I really like to do that I create. And so that isn't laziness. That's just like giving life.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I was going to add one more thing onto that because that was so good. And then it totally
But I think there is something like, I just remember all the time my youth pastor saying, sometimes the most godly thing to do is just take a nap. And I think in our culture, we've just like forget about that. We're like, oh, that would be so lazy. Like that would be so selfish or whatever. And it's like, no, I think sometimes God wants that.
Here's one last pro tip I'll give, which I think Alyssa basically said, is no one who asks that question is usually lazy. No one.
That's what
lazy people never ask that question. Lazy people never ask
the question. You're on the right track. Makes me think of Gordon MacDonald has this great line in his book, Ordering Your Private World. It's my favorite line in the book. Let's see if I can quote it. He writes that time must be properly budgeted for the gathering of inner strength and resolve to compensate for weaknesses when spiritual warfare begins.
Yes, so amen. Good. It's like that's where you draw from.
It's so true.
Yeah, yeah. And so, there's a direct link between emotional health and love, and between emotional health or rest or whatever you want to call it, soul care, and sin, And the more you rest, the more capacity you have for love and to fight off temptation. And the more tired you are, the more grouchy and unloving and hurried you are, and the more vulnerable you are to temptation, So maybe one last, there's a great question here from Megan and a real similar one from our pal Lauren. Just like I think the question was, I have a toddler, and should my husband and I Sabbath on separate days? I mean, again, this is not biblical command stuff. Just my opinion is heck no, and we did something similar to what you guys are doing, and Lauren, for what you're thinking about. I think in my so far experience, the two hardest times for Sabbath, other than COVID-19, are when our kids were really little and like 1 to 3. And now that they're in teenage years, ironically, is actually another different set of issues because they're more mobile and they want to do more stuff and they're super extroverted and they want to go out in the city and all that kind of stuff. So navigating each is an interesting thing. But one thing we did when they were little that seemed to work really good, we had some little hacks, like, I forget who told us this, but we had a special, this is very middle class, but a special box of toys. They weren't even expensive.
No, yeah, totally.
They were just Sabbath toys. Yep. Like when kids are at that certain age, like new
it
toy,
feels like Christmas.
It could be a spatula, and like you just got 45 minutes on the couch. You know what I mean? Like you give them this thing.
Box.
Yes.
You just bought yourself a chapter in a book and a cup of tea. And so we had Sabbath toys that they only got to play with on Sabbath and put away. And then we divided the day into thirds. And this is just our psychosis, but a third, we'd all do fun family stuff together. We'd walk down to New Season's grocery store that we were living by, and everybody get a little cookie or something cheap, and we'd have something fun, do hot cocoa with the kids, read. Yeah. Then a third of the day, T would watch the kids, and I would go be alone, read, journal. And then the other third, I would watch the kids, play with them, do stuff. And she would go out with her friends most of the week and like have tea with her friends, go ride her bike, see people. And that kind of worked pretty good for us, not like that's just what worked.
I love that.
No,
Well, I think that's
we kind of do the same.
Yeah, very similar. One thing I would say why you shouldn't maybe do that, it's okay to switch off and kind of tag team in and out in the day. But for us, especially if you're a family, so if you're not a single or young adult by yourself or maybe with some roommates, I think especially as a family, the highest thing that Sabbath does for us is sure it gives us rest and all that stuff. I actually think the highest thing above that is it's a family identity day. It is our family identity day. This is the day where the Bethke-ness gets drilled into the Bethkes. You know what I mean? And there's something about that week after week after week that just is so strong for family culture, DNA. It's like, and you need that once a week. You need you need a family identity day where it is just being pushed into you strongly with mechanisms that you experiment with, because you'll try and some stink and are terrible. But we found that and again, it took us years to get there, but now that we're at a place where Friday night and the dinner is like, we go all out, the kids set the table, there's tablecloths, we light the candles, they love all that. So super high tradition, think high ritual, think high kind of things make them excited. And I usually just get a little, overexcited to make it fun. So I'll sometimes stand on the chair and say something or whatever, and just turn the lights off and you just make it fun, make it, especially with toddlers, it's so easy to make it fun. Like you said that, if you're just excited and do something random, that, and then the storytelling is really important. So we have this journal called the Grandpa's Journal or Grandma's Journal, and we got on Amazon. And it's one of the best question journals I've ever seen in my life, where you're supposed to give it to a grandparent and they're supposed to fill it out over a couple of years. There's a couple different variations. So I'll see if I can find the one and come back and post it in the comments. But the one we found, we love. So I don't know about the other ones. And the questions are just profound. So instead of doing it the way you're supposed to, of giving it to them over a couple of years, we just bust it out and just ask them, oh, here's 2 questions for tonight. Boom. Or we have the kids love it. We kind of try to get out of the way, give the kids prompts. Our oldest, she just feasts on the stories, and we'll just say think of anything to prompt the grandparents. And she sees it as a little mission. So she'll say bicycle or summer or 10 years old or pool or first job. She gets to name a prompt, and they just kind of have to start talking about what's a memory I have with the bike? What's a memory I have for my first job? What's a memory? And you do that week after week after week. And that is family identity driving, right? That, and then I would say,
what's the name of that book? That little book?
I literally think it's called Grandfather's Journal or Grandmother's Journal. I will look it up and try to put it in the comments, because there is multiple options, and I don't know if the other ones are good. The one we have, we love. Questions amazing. Are so unique, so specific, so creative. Yeah, if you pull it up on Amazon, we'll show it to the camera real quick so people know what to look for. Kind of has a gross flowery cover.
Yeah, it's not.
Book covers are terrible.
Not pretty, but
yeah, right there. Can you see that? It might blur a little, but just look for the one with the green bar. Yeah, right there. Yeah, that's it. There's a grandma and a grandpa one.
$15.
Yeah, and the questions are just through the roof. It goes through different seasons with grandparents. It's amazing, So all that. I would say that, amazing. And then we end Sabbath with family movie night. Because here's the thing too, is that you can watch. You can watch movies. Here's the thing too, is screen time's not all created equal, and that's what bothers me with sometimes family conversations, right? There's a wild million-year difference between a kid who's watching a movie off in the corner, disconnected from the family, versus we're all cuddling up, we just popped the popcorn, the kids are dancing, and we're about to watch family movie night. That's an identity-making ritual, especially if it's the same night every single week that they look forward to, they anticipate. So we start with that, end with that. In the middle is just have fun, rest, go outside, go for walks, give her a break, give me a break, experiment. And the bookends are strong enough to actually still make it a really strong day, no matter if the middle is not good. And so, that's what it is for.
So well said.
Oh my goodness, Lauren Winter popped into the comments. Lauren,
of course.
Lauren,
today,
hire her.
as always. Lauren Winter, do you want a job? Oh my gosh. Well, Jeff and Alyssa, thank you so much. Give our love to your kids. So grateful that you would give your time and your whole self and your wisdom and your experience as a family and your beautiful mind and tender, aware soul. Thank you for that. You guys are crazy famous. The internet is in love with you. But for anybody that happens to be new to you, what's the best way to find out about your work and all that you do?
Yeah, so if they are watching from your guys' stuff, not familiar with who we are, I would say familyteams.com is where you're going to find most of the stuff that feels in the spirit of what we talked about. But then we're just on all social media, and jeffandalyssa.com is our normal website for us outside of family stuff. And that has links to everything else too, but just Jefferson Bethke and Alyssa Joy Bethke on all platforms.
And your recent book is very similar to mine, but has the way cooler title. It's called The Hell with the Hustle.
And the Christian version is to heck with the hustle, but yes.
Oh, so I love it. It lets me be a cussing pastor just for that one moment when I recommend it. It was, other than the fact that it's better than mine and came out before mine, I love it.
No.
Seriously, people have loved. It's so fun to see everyone post the books together. People love the podcast we did
Yeah.
together. That podcast, man, that was so fun. And I don't think me or you either thought that was going to do as well as it did.
It was really
fun. Can I just say, I know I've said this to you guys before. I love your 2 books together that it came out. They're like twins. But I felt like you, John Mark, were like so pastoral in it, and then Jeff.
And I wasn't.
No, you were prophetic. So I feel like it was.
Yeah, it was a good.
It was just like really
call.
sweet to see the Lord use both of your giftings in like a full body way that we all needed.
Yeah.
So
Someone said in the comments, "Have we already coordinated our next book covers to be same color, same?"
You're doing blue, right?
Yes, exactly.
No, it's okay. My next book is mostly on Satan. So I doubt it's probably.
I know you gave. Yeah, you gave us the preview when they were here.
Right.
Months ago. Yeah, I'm stoked for that. That's gonna be good.
Yeah.
Oh well, you guys, I'm so grateful. Thank you for your time, and all of you on Facebook.